What I'm dealing with is hard because it involves more than just my heart. It involves a lot of little hearts. You know, we have 4 kids, and divorce is never easy. And we're both from divorce.
She kept the ranch. She lost the marriage. And somewhere between those two outcomes, Kelly Clarkson had to rebuild an entire life in front of millions of people who thought they already knew her story. For years, the image was simple. A small-town Texas girl who won a singing competition, married a rugged Montana talent manager, and built a picture-perfect blended family on a sprawling ranch under big open sky. It looked like the fairy tale that reality television had promised America back in 2002, but fairy tales rarely survive contact with real life, and Kelly Clarkson's marriage to Brandon Blackstock would end not with a quiet goodbye, but with a courtroom battle over money, property, and the very ground the family once called home. To understand how she came out standing, even victorious in some very concrete, legal ways, you have to go back to where the story actually started, long before the ranch, long before the wedding, and long before the headlines. Kelly Clarkson's rise began in an era before anyone knew what a reality television star could really become. In 2002, she won the very first season of American Idol, defeating runner-up Justin Guarini with 58% of the vote at the Kodak Theater. It was a victory that didn't just launch her own career, it helped validate an entire genre of television that critics dismissed as a passing fad. Her debut single, a double A-side featuring Before Your Love and A Moment Like This, shot from number 60 on the Billboard Hot 100 all the way to number 1, breaking a record that had stood since the Beatles. Her first album, Thankful, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and eventually sold more than 4.5 million copies worldwide. She was, by any measure, a phenomenon. But Kelly's public success masked a private history that would quietly shape everything that came after, including the way she would one day handle heartbreak of her own. Kelly was born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1982 to a first-grade teacher and an engineer. When she was 6 years old, her parents divorced, and the family fractured in a way that left lasting marks. Her older brother went to live with their father. Her sister was sent to live with an aunt. Kelly stayed behind with her mother. Her father, Stephen Michael Clarkson, largely disappeared from her life afterward, a wound she would later channel into one of her most emotionally raw songs, Piece by Piece, which chronicles a father who walked away and never came back. That early rupture in her own family is part of what makes her adult marriage, and its ending resonates so deeply with the people who have followed her story for more than 2 decades. She grew up watching a marriage fall apart. As an adult, she would live through one falling apart of her own. But this time, with the whole world watching, Kelly first crossed paths with Brandon Blackstock in 2006 during a rehearsal for the Academy of Country Music Awards. He was a talent manager, the son of veteran music executive Narvel Blackstock, and stepson of country star Reba McEntire, who Kelly had known professionally for years. That first meeting didn't lead anywhere. It would take several more years and several more turns of fate before their paths crossed again in a way that mattered. By the time they reconnected, a friendship had quietly grown into something more, and in December 2012, Brandon proposed. They married in October 2013 in Tennessee, blending Brandon's 2 children from a previous marriage with the family they would soon build together. Their daughter, River Rose, was born in 2014, and their son, Remington Alexander, followed in 2016. To the outside world, and for many years even to Kelly herself, this looked like the marriage that had eluded her own parents, stable, warm, and built to last. For a long stretch, Kelly spoke about Brandon with real affection in interviews, describing a closeness she said she had never experienced with anyone before him. Publicly, they appeared at award shows and industry events looking every bit the settled, happy couple. But according to Kelly's own later comments in interviews, The private reality of the marriage did not match the image being presented to cameras. She has said that even while married, she often felt profoundly alone, describing periods where she felt like she was essentially living as a single parent without the partnership she had hoped for, balancing an increasingly demanding career, hosting her own daytime talk show, serving as a coach on The Voice, releasing new music. With the isolation she said she felt at home became, in her words, an emotional weight that built for years before it broke. In June 2020, after nearly 7 years of marriage, Kelly filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. It was not a decision made lightly or suddenly. By her own account, it was the product of a long, quiet unraveling rather than any single dramatic event, and she has described the process itself as something that tore her apart emotionally. What followed was not a quick, amicable separation. It became one of the more drawn-out and contentious celebrity divorces of the decade, playing out through 2020, 2021, and into 2022, with disputes touching nearly every major area a divorce can touch: spousal support, child custody, and, perhaps most publicly, property. At the center of the property dispute was the family's Montana ranch, a sprawling piece of land that had become deeply symbolic of the life Kelly and Brandon had tried to build together. Brandon fought to claim an interest in the property during the proceedings, but in a significant ruling, the court determined that the ranch belonged solely to Kelly. It was a legal victory with real weight, not just financially, but symbolically. The home that had represented their shared future became, through the divorce, unambiguously hers alone. Even after the ruling, Brandon reportedly remained on the property for a period of time before he was ultimately ordered to vacate by June 2022, closing out one of the more drawn-out chapters of the case. On the custody side, a judge granted Kelly primary custody of River and Remington in November 2020, giving her the framework to raise her children with Brandon in a more limited, secondary role going forward. The financial side of the divorce also drew significant attention, with reporting from outlets including People and Billboard detailing ongoing disputes over spousal and child support obligations tied to Kelly's income as a musician, talk show host, and television personality. These were not abstract legal technicalities. They represented a prolonged, public accounting of a marriage's financial architecture, playing out in filings and hearings, even as Kelly continued to show up on television 5 days a week, hosting guests and cracking jokes in front of a studio audience that, for a long time, had no idea what she was carrying behind the scenes. In February 2022, in the middle of this legal battle, Kelly made another deeply personal decision. She legally changed her name to Kelly Brianne, dropping Clarkson for private, non-professional purposes. She would continue performing and appearing under the name Kelly Clarkson, the identity the public had known since 2002, but she has explained that the change carried personal significance tied not just to Brandon, but to her complicated relationship with her father, whose absence had shaped so much of her emotional life long before Brandon Blackstock ever entered the picture. It was a small legal act with an outsized emotional resonance, a woman quietly reclaiming a piece of her own identity in the middle of losing so much else. Rather than retreat from her public role, during this period, Kelly leaned into her work as a form of processing. In June 2023, she released her 10th studio album, Chemistry, which explored love, heartbreak, and healing in ways widely read by critics as a direct reflection of her marriage and divorce. Critics praised the record for its honesty and emotional depth, with several outlets calling it among the most personal work of her career. That same year, she relocated to New York City with her children to film the 5th season of The Kelly Clarkson Show, a move she has described as both a professional shift and a genuine fresh start for her family. She has spoken candidly in interviews about her children's feelings on the subject of future relationships, noting that River and Remington have told her they would prefer she stay single, sentiments she says she respects rather than dismisses, choosing instead to focus her energy on stability and open communication with them rather than rushing into anything new. What makes Kelly Clarkson's divorce different from so many public separations is not the presence of conflict. Plenty of celebrity marriages end in legal disputes over money and property. What stands out is the contrast between what she won and what she lost. She won the ranch, outright and unambiguously, a tangible piece of ground the court determined was hers alone. She won primary custody of her children. She won, in the years since, a kind of creative and professional renewal, turning private pain into an album critics called some of her most important work. But no legal ruling could hand her back the version of her life she had believed she was building for nearly a decade. The family portrait that looked complete from the outside while quietly falling apart within it. That is the real story beneath the headlines and the court documents. Not simply who got what, but what it costs to rebuild an entire sense of home after the picture you believed in turns out to have been only half true. Kelly Clarkson kept her land. She kept her children close. And in the years since her divorce became final, she has, by her own account and by the steady, visible evidence of her work, kept moving forward. Not because the pain disappeared, but because she chose, deliberately and publicly,